Hi everyone, this is Paul from Common Touch of Fantasy. Sorry I haven't been making many videos recently. I just really haven't felt like doing it, and I just haven't made many. Today's video is going to be a discussion video, and I'd like to talk about something, and I'd like to get everyone's opinion on it, so please comment below. Today's discussion video is this. Should we rate older fantasy or sci-fi books based on the time that the book was written, or should we rate it based off of the knowledge of all that came after it? Also, if a book is imaginative or groundbreaking during when it was released, but now it's considered to be tropey and cliche, does that lessen the quality of the book? And then thirdly, there are certain books that are definitely timeless. They're just as good now as they were back then when they were released. What makes them this way? What makes those type of books timeless? My opinion on the first question is this. I believe it is extremely hard not to judge a book based on when it was written in comparison to what was written after. To some extent, we all rate books based off of what books we've already read. Obviously, someone that's read like 1,000 fantasy books will have a completely different understanding and opinion of a book than someone that has only read like 100 fantasy books. What one person finds fresh and exciting, someone else might find boring and cliche. But is the fantasy reader missing out on the experience of reading fantastic books from the past because the books they read now are the product of all that came after that? I'm not sure. Should we be trying to read fantasy in some sort of order? Like, for example, should we be reading it from like the 60s to the 70s? Should there be like certain series of fantasy books that we should be reading before we read more fantasy books? So, for example, for me, I would have loved to have read David Eddings' The Belgeriad before I read a lot of the newer stuff. I still have not read it, and I have a feeling that when I do read it, I probably won't enjoy it as much as a newer book. And as much as I would like to read 30 fantasy series based off of the publication date from like the oldest to the newest, to see how the genre has expanded and grown, it's a really rigid system for me, and it's not something that I would do. Even though that's something that I would like to do, it would be difficult for me to do. So that runs into the second question. Do imaginative books for their time lessen their quality because they are now considered tropey and cliched? Unfortunately, I believe that it does. The more books that are created in the same vein of style and substance will lessen the quality of their original books. Not to mention, people can take what was written before and then just add to it and improve on it. However, I don't think we should be putting down books that came before as like a substandard version of what to expect now. So I don't think we should talk about Dragonlance or R.A. Salvatore books or the D&D inspired books, Forgotten Realm books, the Terry Brooks books, the David Eddings books, stuff like that. I don't think we should be putting those books down as bad books. I think we should be able to appreciate them for what they were at the time, but at the same time realize, they're kind of old in style, kind of old in substance as well, and we might consider some of the things in the books a little bit cliched, a little bit tropey. And it's a difficult thing to grasp and to deal with when you're reading fantasy and sci-fi. There was a time when people wanted the orphan farm boy that goes and kills the great big bad evil in the world. Those books were popular. People loved those books, and they thought they were fresh, and they thought they were exciting. Nowadays, we don't think that. We think that they're very cliched, or we think that they're very tropey. It's just a matter of time before the large, casted, political enveloped, little fantasy, darker world that kind of like Game of Thrones-ish, with like all the castles, becomes the next like joke for fantasy. It becomes the next cliche. And it's interesting, as an older reader, the books that people loved during the 90s that people now considered cliche. I love Robert Jordan. Wheel of Time is my favorite series. When those books came out, they were amazing. I loved them. But I can now see, after all these years, that, yeah, other people have done the same thing. People have tried to copy it, and even Jordan himself copied what other people have done. He did. I think he did it well, but we have to be careful not to prejudge something based off of what we believe is a cliche or it's a trope. We just have to be careful not to prejudge it, and it's like I said, it's next to impossible to be able to judge something objectively without looking at all the newer books that you've read and comparing to that. Like, if you take, for example, like the Mistborn trilogy, and then you compare that to maybe, I don't know, Ted Williams' trilogy, something like that. It's just so different. The times when Ted Williams wrote, the Memory Sorrow books, and then when Sanderson wrote Mistborn, they're completely different. One, is more focused on the characters and like the big bad evil and the kingdoms and stuff, things that we might consider cliche and tropey, and then the other one's more focused about the world building and the magic system. And there might be a time, 10 years from now, when Brandon Sanderson is in the same... We're talking about Brandon Sanderson the same way people talk about Terry Brooks, same way we talk about David Eddings. So it might happen. You never know where the fantasy genre will go. And everything also with sci-fi is lumped into this because it's similar in that regards. The Lord of the Rings will always be considered a timeless fantasy book. That is just as good now as it was when it was released. We know the amount of depth and skill that Tolkien used to create Middle-earth. Creating an entire new language is honestly ridiculous. The guy was a genius. His it was just amazing, But is it more than just the next to perfect world building that makes Lord of the Rings timeless? I'm not sure. I don't know why it's considered this timeless book, where people love it now just as much as then. It's real. I mean, it's good, and the characters are great. The world's amazing, but what's the big difference? That's kind of like what I'm trying to get at. I believe that when it comes to fantasy and sci-fi, there are three main ingredients that make up the story. Good characters, deep world building, and an amazing plot. If a story is able to have some of the best characters, or have the most ingenious world building, or have a plot that grabs the reader, these are the type of books that are going to last. These are the type of books that will not be considered tropey, will not be considered cliched, And sometimes it's difficult to know at the time when that book is released. When that book that you gave a 5-star last month, 20 years from now, is considered a kid's book and something that's mundane fantasy, that people would give like a 2-star in the future. So I'd like to hear everyone's thoughts. I might have rambled a little bit. What do you guys think about this? How do you feel about this? Please comment below, and thank you for watching.